Gaming Geek here with part 1 of One Page Rules versus Games Workshop. And in this video, I'm going to be comparing the Games Workshop models of the Seraphon versus the Saurians from One Page Rules to see which one is better. And I'm also going to be exploring whether or not it is a viable solution to be 3D printing out entire armies. And in this case, it's going to be a Seraphon army or a Saurian army, lizardmen, basically riding dinosaurs. Before we get into today's video though, I want to share what the GGGG is for this month. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks some of my Patreon supporters to receive gratitude gifts. And for this month, July of 2021, one of the GGGGs is this small cottage from Hagglethorn Hollow. This painted version, this will be mailed out to one of my Patreon supporters, as well as a full set of these HAB units. I have videos on both of those, so check out my video playlist if you want to see those in more detail. And the crowdfunder for this month most likely will be a pledge for Chronicles of Drunagor, the second crowdfunder, which is currently on GameFound right now. Use the link below in the descriptions to head on over to my Patreon page if you're interested in getting in on that. Also, at the end of the video, if you want to skip ahead, I do have a painting tutorial where I walk through painting up one of these Saurian guards as well as one of these geckos or skinks. So if that's helpful to you, go ahead and skip ahead. So if you're subscribed to my channel, you know that I have been going back and forth about whether or not to get into Age of Sigmar. And more recently, I decided against it. If you want to check out that video and how I came to that conclusion, go ahead and check this out here. Those of you also know that I really like to play Blitz Bowl, and recently I picked up the Seraphon faction and I really liked the models a lot, as you can see here. Here is one of the Saurus guards as well as a skink. And so I was impressed with that, and I started looking into and wanting to potentially build up a Seraphon army. At the same time, Gaetano from One Page Rules had reached out to me actually a year ago asking me if I would do a review video for one of his One Page Rules games. And at the time I did agree, but I feel bad because I really didn't get around to doing it until more recently. And so this was a good time to really check out whether or not their Saurian army, how it stacked up to Games Workshop miniatures. So I wanted to put those two together to really do a comparison. I also wanted to see if it was possible to 3D print an entire army, especially for Age of Sigmar, whether or not that could be done with all of it being proxy miniatures. But I did go ahead and I did purchase the Start Collecting box with the Saurian Guard. There is another Start Collecting box with the Skinks, but this is the version that I bought. This was $85 on Amazon, and again, affiliate links in the descriptions below if you're interested. But I went ahead and bought this because I wanted to do a comparison. And so all of the models here are from that Start Collecting box. And then all of the models from this point over here are One Page Rules. And when I went ahead and started building this, I was disappointed that they didn't really look like the Seraphon Blitz Bowl team, because I thought the Blitz Bowl models looked really awesome. Instead, like Chris, one of the famous YouTubers who give a lot of advice online about how to run Seraphon, he describes all of these models as derpy, D-E-R-P-Y. And I think that's a perfect word for what these guys look like. Because if you take a look at them, I know that these are sort of old models from when Warhammer Fantasy Battle was still being published. These guys haven't been updated since then. And so they look much more cartoonish. Their heads are oversized and their bodies look sort of skinny and emaciated, and they just overall look a little bit goofy. So that was disappointing because I was expecting them to look like the Blitz Bowl models, which look awesome and cool. And so right away, if you do a comparison between the Saurus warriors here and the Saurian warriors here, you can see that the One Page Rules models are way better than the Games Workshop ones, because the head is not oversized, it's in proportion to the rest of the body. Like the chest is really big, the feet are large, looks like they can, looks like a raptor that can rip out your chest with those talons and claws. The details is much more if you check out on their shields. They look a lot cooler, and the poses are more dynamic because you're not stuck with this sort of walking like an Egyptian pose that you're stuck with regarding the Games Workshop models. And so these guys are a lot more dynamic. Now, what you get with the simpler poses and less details on the Games Workshop stuff is that you can paint them a lot faster, but I think the one-page rules Saurians look a lot better. Just aesthetically, they are more dynamic, they look a lot cooler, they have a lot more details. That's also going to be true for the Skinks. Now, I didn't buy any Skinks. I do have a Skink here from the Blitzbowl team. But if you look at the pictures online with the Skinks, what One Page Rules calls the Geckos, which is a Skink equivalent, also has more details. It has this headdress of feathers as well as more bits and pieces on the body. And so I actually think the details and the dynamic poses on these guys are better. Now, to be sure, all of these you can print out from One Page Rules with separate body parts so that you can pose them if you want. I chose not to go that route. It was much faster for me to use their pre-supported complete models, and so all these models came out as one piece because I didn't care about posing them differently, because there was enough variety that even though I printed multiples of them, there's enough variety that you really can't tell. So that's the route I went, and the Skinks definitely look a lot better here than, again, with Games Workshop. The place that I think there is the biggest qualitative difference is with the Croxagores. So with Games Workshop, those Croxagores look even more derpy, look even more silly and cartoonish than any other model. And what drives me crazy is for 3 of them, it's $55. So if you want to field a team of 6, you have to pay $110 for these derpy looking alligators. Now look at the ones from One Page Rules. These guys look awesome. They look beefy, they look chunky, they look totally badass with their weapons. And so this is where I think the qualitative difference between One Page Rules, the STL files, and Games Workshop is the most noticeable. I mean, they look really awesome. Now let's talk about some of the larger dinosaurs. I did print out the Tyrannosaurus Rex from One Page Rules, but Gaetano asked me not to show it to you guys because he needed to go back and make some changes to that model as well as the Star Priest. I did print out 2 of them. I'm going to go ahead and honor that and not show that to you. I think he had to change them up a little bit, possibly for copyright issues. And so I'm not going to show you, but I did print those out. They do look awesome. And in fact, when I showed my Patreon supporters, if they could guess which one was the Carnosaur from Games Workshop and which one was from One Page Rules, they really couldn't tell. That's how good the quality is. And then also here, this is the Ankylosaur, the equivalent of the Bastillodon from Games Workshop. Again, I didn't buy the starter box for the Skink, so I don't know exactly what it looks like, but when I looked online, this looked pretty sweet. Obviously, they don't have that gem thing that shoots out gem stuff. Instead, they have this cannon-like thing, which I actually prefer. And I also magnetize this because you do have the option. The file does come with this snake spitter thing where it's spitting out all these snakes. So I wanted to be able to swap those out. The beautiful thing about this, though, is if I want another Bastillodon, I can just print out another one. I don't have to pay $85 to get another one of these models. And then also you can take a look at these Saurus Knights. One Page Rules calls these the Raptor Riders instead. But again, because the Lizardmen or the Saurian on there just looks a lot better than the derpy looking ones from Games Workshop. So that consistency is sort of carried through. And then here you have the example of the Slon, which again is part of the entire army set from One Page Rules. And so this model, again, by itself is $55 from Games Workshop. Or if you want to buy Lord Croak, that is a $100 plus model for just one guy. And if I'm ever going to play Lord Croak, then I'm just honestly going to just use this model here. The other advantage of 3D printing your army is that you can actually print out the ones that you need. One of the things that drives me crazy is whenever you buy these box sets from Games Workshop, they never come in multiples of 5 or 10, which is exactly the unit number for most of your battle line in Age of Sigmar. And I know why that happens is because they usually can only fit 4 or maybe 6 to a sprue. And so they're sort of stuck with how many of those sprues that they can fit inside of the box. And that's why in this start collecting box, you're getting 8 of the Saurus Knights and 12 of the Saurus Warriors. And so when you're trying to field a battle line of 20, you can't just go out and get 8 more somewhere. You have to buy a whole nother box and you're gonna have extra left over, whereas when you're 3D printing, you just print out the ones that you want. And so here I wanted 30 of the Skinks with blowpipes, and I was able to print out exactly 30. I don't have anything left over. Because there was 12 Saurus Knights, I printed out 8 of the Saurian Warriors, and that way I have, or a unit of 20 of those. So there's a way that you can save resources and money by just printing out the ones that you want and the ones that you need. And so let's go ahead and compare the price as well, because if I wanted to field what you see here on this table, I calculated it out, and you can see here on this list, I'm going to put it up on the screen, it's going to cost me $440 if I go the Games Workshop route to field this army. Don't ask me how many points this army is. I didn't count it up or anything like that. I don't know. But this is a pretty good size army that I think you can start out with, and that's going to cost you over $400 for these models. And any place where I could buy it off of Amazon or get the discount from my local gaming store, I chose the cheaper of the 2 prices. Now the Croxagores and the Slan I could not find available anywhere except for Games Workshop, and that's why it's the listed price there. They're pretty expensive. So it's going to cost $440 to field this army here, and if you want more, for example, if I wanted another Bastiladon, I'd have to pay either to get another start collecting box of Skinks, which is the more economical one, or buy one of these, which is about $80 just to buy one of these guys. So it is very expensive once you start buying piecemeal the ones that you want. In comparison, One Page Rules, this whole army bundle costs $78. Now you can get it for half that price if you are a $10 a month Patreon supporter. You're going to get a coupon for anything on their web store, which is totally worth it. So go ahead and jump in and be a Patreon supporter. Links in the descriptions below. You'll be able to print out everything that you see here and even more. There's models that I didn't even print out. Now there are some models, if you're playing Age of Sigmar, that is not in this bundle. So for example, the Stegodon is not available, but there are other files. I did a Google search and I'm currently printing out a Stegodon off of my machine right now, Engine of the Gods, but that was with a different company that produced that STL file. Again, I'll show you once we go over the computer all the resources that are available. So pretty much you can print out almost every single unit from the Seraphon army list if you're going to play Age of Sigmar. And as you can see here, qualitatively, I actually think at least the One Page Rules ones look better than the Games Workshop ones. Clearly, if you're going to be competitive and going into tournaments, you are not allowed to use 3D printed miniatures, and so you are stuck spending the money. But most people that are serious about that know that that's a money investment and they're willing to do that. But for me, who's going to be a casual player, right? I'm not a competitive player. It's way more economical for me to go the 3D printing route. So like I said before, it's $78. Let's say that's not even the half price, 50% off of $39 for this army, but let's say I'm paying the full $78 for this STL file set. And then I paid $42 for a kilogram of resin. Now, I don't know exactly how much resin I used because I was experimenting and trying to see which resin, because I was troubleshooting my resin printer. But I think I did use up probably a little bit more than a kilogram, and that cost me $42. Now let's go ahead and throw in the price of my resin printer. I looked up on Amazon and you can buy it right now for $180. And my printer is first generation. It's an Elegoo Mars first generation clone, Chinese knockoff, and not even the more modern ones that you can get today with monochrome that prints like 3 times faster than my current one. But throw in my version and you're still coming out cheaper than the Games Workshop army. So for this army, not counting the $85 that I spent here, I spent total of $300, and that includes the price of buying my resin printer right now, as well as the material cost for the resin. So $140 cheaper than if I were to go this route. And again, once you buy the resin printer, that's a sunk cost. You don't have to keep buying that over and over again every time you print out an army. And so you're going to save money the more miniatures that you print out. So it is way, way more economical to be printing out your own miniatures. Now, there is more time, I think, because when you print out your own miniatures, you have to remove all the supports, you have to clean them before they get to a state where you can prime them and spray them up. That process does take, I think, a little bit longer than it takes to assemble the Games Workshop models, but not by a lot. But time-wise and hobby-wise, having a resin printer is its own hobby, does have a time sink into it, so you do have to take that into consideration. But if you're planning on printing out your own miniatures, that is totally viable. And in this circumstance, where the printed ones actually look better than the Games Workshop ones, this is the route to go. Let's go ahead and go over to the computer, and I'm going to go ahead and show you one-page rules and some of the websites so that you can see not only this line that you can purchase now, but also other models and other lines that One Page Rules has, and you can check that out. All right, so here is the website for One Page Rules. It's onepagerules.com. Again, links in the descriptions below. But head on over there, and this is all of the different rule sets that they have, and Age of Fantasy is the rule set that I'm going to be coming out with future videos, so make sure to be subscribed. But come over here and click on miniatures, and you have a couple of options. You can buy 2D paper models, or you can buy physical models on Etsy. My Mini Factory, if you're going to be printing out your own, because that is the most economical, and as you can see here, it'll take you to My Mini Factory, and you have a bunch of different armies that are for sale. Again, if you're a Patreon supporter, you're going to see a bunch of these models that is available for you. And just click on the Fantasy Army Bundle Set, and here you're going to find the Saurians. Again, for $78. This is going to be half price. Definitely worth it if you are a $10 a month Patreon supporter to get that 50% off discount. And this is all of the models that you're going to get. So I think it's a great variety. Once again, you do have the option of printing out the arms and legs separately so that you can pose them differently. But for the sake of speed and time, I think there's enough variety with each of the models that I was able to just print out the whole model. And like I mentioned before, I did print out the old version of this. This has been revamped, but it looks very similar. I do like how the Tyrannosaurus looks like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I actually found that the model was a little bit small, so I would definitely print this out at like 115, 120% to be about the same size as the Games Workshop Carnosaur. So just keep that in mind. But obviously you will print him out at regular 100% rather than increasing his size, or else he'll be out of scale. And this is the new Star Priest, so I'll be printing out a couple of these as well. Since for units of Skinks, it seems pretty good to have both a Star Priest and a Priest to buff up those, at least in Age of Sigmar. I don't know about One Page Rules yet. And then here is the Frog Mage, or the Slan. And I did like the fact that it was glued onto the base rather than being precarious on one of those clear sticks. I was fine with that, but you can modify it if you want it on a stick. And the great thing is it does come fully pre-supported. I needed, like I mentioned before, to troubleshoot my print settings because the Atlas supports that are on here, Atlas is the name of the company that made the pre-supports, it was all failing. So Gitano sent me a link to the Discord, and here I was able to troubleshoot, and they gave me the settings that worked best with my printer. So definitely, as part of a Patreon supporter, you will have access to Discord. They have a ton of channels, but this is a great place where I was able to fine-tune my printer in order to successfully print all these out. And I love that they're pre-supported. I hate doing supports. I can never get them right, so these supports are successful. They do have a bunch of different armies, so they have this Mummified Undead for $68, and they have squats. And here are some game aids. They have measuring rulers, they have bases that you can put onto your 3D printed miniatures. I do use my FDM printer to create basically these flat ones, and I made my own. Look at the links below for Thingiverse, where I have posted all of the Games Workshop equivalent size bases, but they're made so that you can put a 3mm by 2mm magnet, because I carry all of my miniatures on a cooking tray and magnetize all of the bases. So you can use those as well. And they do have a whole line of sci-fi models in addition to fantasy. So go ahead and peruse all the different models that they have. Also, if you are building a Seraphon army, when I Googled Seraphon in my mini factory, here are some of the results that I received. Obviously, One Page Rules has a bunch of theirs. I think theirs is so far the only pre-supported ones that I've seen. Another popular sculptor is Orc King Studio, so this is their version of the Bastillodon, although I do prefer the one from One Page Rules more than this one. But because it's going to be a while before One Page Rules gets the equivalent of the Stegodon, here is one. This is the one I'm currently printing. This is from Raven Twin Miniatures, because this was the closest to what I saw to the Games Workshop equivalent. Again, this is too small to print as is, and I needed to print this at 110% in order for it to equal. I probably should have gone 115, even maybe 120. I think some of the other ones that One Page Rules hasn't covered yet are the pterodactyl riders. And again, Raven Twin Miniatures has that version here. And additionally, they do have salamanders if you want salamander units. And here you can even print out one of the pyramids, which is a terrain feature for only $5. Because I think the Games Workshop version might be $50. I'm not 100% sure, but obviously it's a lot cheaper to print out your own. And I would definitely use an FDM printer over a resin printer, because my resin printer I don't think could fit the size that this needs to be. Here's a Celestial banner if you wanted that. But again, it'll sort of be mix and match. I don't really mind that, but there are a lot of STL files that are available online. So this is definitely a good way to go. Hopefully this video was helpful for you. Again, stick around if you do want to see the painting tutorial, but I hope that you can see that 3D printing an army for Age of Sigmar, also for any other mass battle army games, it is viable. There are files out there. To be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that Games Workshop hasn't tried to shut down these companies that are creating alternative models, because it is so much cheaper. And we all know that Games Workshop is crazy, and I think recently they are starting to go after people that made fan-made videos highlighting their products, which again is so stupid. But if you don't want to deal with the craziness of Games Workshop, this is definitely a viable way to go. Again, check out my link to my Patreon page if you want to get in on the GGGG. Otherwise, happy printing, happy painting, happy gaming. We'll see you next time. So the first color we're going to tackle is the Talassar Blue, which is the base of all of these guys. And you're going to need to water it down some so you can get some of the contrast medium. Or if you want to save money, I actually use this Liquitex matte medium, and I got it at Hobby Lobby. I used my 40% off coupon, and it was about $5. So this is going to be, obviously you're getting way more than you are here, and this is more watery and watered down. You will have to water this down because this is thicker, but they basically function the same. So go ahead and grab some of this at your local craft store if you want to save some money, or if you're going to be using a lot of this. But I'll go ahead and show you how to use this, because probably most of you will actually grab this while you're getting your contrast colors. And here I have an example, because I did test colors, and this is the unwatered down version of Talassar Blue. This is a Kellyan Green to the left, and as you can see, it is stronger. So the reason, this is optional, but the reason why we water it down some is just to tone down that blue color to not be so bright. But that's optional. If you want it to be that bright, you can go ahead and do that, because the difference is subtle. But that's what we're going to do first. So I just go ahead and grab some of this and put it onto my paint plate, And just put some of this as well onto your plate. And the mixture, I would say, is about 50-50. But you can just experiment and see what works well for you. Try not to get the claws. We're grabbing some ultramarine blue contrast color, and in the same way we're also going to be using the contrast medium in order to water it down, because again, just straight out of the pot, it's just too strong and it will just cover up all the scales without really showing any of the details. It'll just completely cover the whole thing. So by using the contrast medium and watering it down, what you're going to see is that the scales are actually going to be visible by doing this technique. And what you're doing is you're just going to be coloring the top portion of the models. And I have quite a bit on here, so I'm going to want to make sure to get some of that off. But see how by thinning it out, you're able to see the scales better. Because this blue is actually really dark and will completely cover everything in a solid dark blue. So you won't really be able to see any of the scales very distinctly. So go ahead and pull some of this stuff off and distribute it evenly around here, and then overlap the Talisar blue so that you're getting sort of a fade effect. And then get the top parts of the thighs, and just make sure you don't have any white in between the Talisar blue and the ultramarines blue. There you go. Now I just grab some white and go over any of the parts that I still need to paint a different color. So like the necklace strapping or any of these other parts that I'm going to be using contrast color. I don't do that for the parts that I'm going to paint gold because that is opaque. So for example, this bracelet here, even though I got blue on there, I don't have to go over it with white, just the parts where I'm going to put contrast color onto these parts. Gorgrunta fur. You could also use snakebite leather if you want. I sort of like the reddish tint that this has. And I'm going to do all of the strapping, the necklace here. And then also for these shields, going to fill in the inner area. And again, you can be sloppy because we're going to put gold over most of this. So I'm just filling in some of the inner parts of the shield. Also hit up the base of all of the horns and claws, just because I like it sort of being darker towards the bottom and then fading to lighter towards the top. I think the hand claws are too small to do this with, so I don't bother with the hands. I also am gonna color in part of the mouth right around where the teeth is, and this is just to darken it up so that when I go back over it with white, it just has something, a darker color to contrast against. Otherwise you wouldn't really notice the white teeth at all. So this is just a way to provide a dark background for the white. And as you can see, I don't really go very far back. I just do enough just to cover the teeth. I'm using contrast wildwood. This darker brown, again, this is optional. You could use the Gorgrunta fur or the snakebite leather, but I'm using this for the back of the shields. Not only the strapping here, but also in general just to cover up the back of the shield so it's not white. I like using Magos purple just for the inside of mouths. So for example, I did the inside here with Magos purple, and I think it has sort of that cool color that isn't exactly pink or red, which obviously is probably more the common option, but I just like the kind of color that this Magos purple provides. It isn't such a bright red for the inside of the mouth. So yeah, that's really all I use it for. I really like Retributor armor because it is a deeper, darker gold color. I'm going to grab Seraphim Sepia or Skeleton Horde. They're both the same thing. So typically I use Seraphim Sepia because it's actually cheaper, because you're getting more for the price than you are here. But either one, it's going to have the same effect. I'm almost out of this, so I'm going to go ahead and try to finish this up. And pretty much I am going to hit up all of the bone, claws, as well as the base. Now this base is basically super glue with some sand and then baking soda on top of that. And then do all of his horns. And this is where earlier doing the darker brown at the base just helps with a nice little fade going up. Again, just optional, but I like creating that effect. Could have done it here as well on these, but I didn't really on the sword. But you can do that as well. You can do it even after you do this step first. So just grab a couple of random colors to do the feathers on the shields and some of the other decorations. So I'm just going to grab some Blood Angels red, Orc flesh, and Iandon yellow and paint up the feathers. Now we're going to grab some white again and do the teeth, and I just sort of lightly just dot a couple of the teeth because they aren't that big. So you can do that, and that's enough for the teeth. And then if you want, you can go through and highlight just the tips of the horns. I'm grabbing some yellow, so this is actually not contrast colors, but just regular paint. So grab any opaque yellow that you have and your smallest brush, because we are just going to dot the eyes. They're really small. So that's all the eyes require. The final step before varnishing, I just do a black edge along the base. And obviously you could choose to do tan or brown or whatever color, but I like basing all of mine black. And by the way, for my black and my white, I actually use cheap craft paint just because I use so much of it. And usually after this dries, I put on a second coat. And also I put on a magnet because I transport my miniatures in these cake pans. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check it out here. I'm also going to paint my handle here black as well. I mean, you can do it dark brown too. That'd probably be easier when I had the dark brown out. Now we're going to go ahead and do the skinks, and we're going to do the base color, which is the orange. This is Gryph-hound orange, and once again we're going to thin it out, and this time I'm going to go ahead and use the matte medium just because we're going to do a lot more of these. And I've already put some out, and the matte medium, as you'll notice here, is a lot thicker than the contrast medium. And again, about a 50-50 mix, but this time I'm going to add some water to it just to thin it out a little bit with water. And just basically slather it on, and this time we're going to just do the entire body. I leave the claws white, or at least I try to. And then also make sure that you hit this crest right here, as well as this bottom portion of this back fin, because these feathers are actually part of the headdress, not actual part of the skink. Pulling out the Talisar blue again, and this time I don't bother thinning it out because I am only painting up this fin back here, the inside of it. Now this is an optional step, but I take red tone from Army Painter and create a little bit of a different back on these. Again, it's optional because the difference, I think it actually looks fine with just the orange on there, but I just wanted to create a little bit of a difference on the orange, and adding this subtle wash, this red wash, creates enough of a difference. So I actually tried to use the blue, the same Ultramarines blue that I did with my warriors, and it just didn't look good, so I repainted and got everything back to white so that I could do this instead. Because the transition between the blue and the orange was just too stark, and that's why I ended up changing my mind and doing this instead, because this is much more subtle of a color shift, and so it just blends a little bit better. So, like the other models, I just color these top parts right here. So there's the tail as well if you want to do that. But that makes enough of a difference, I think. But again, that's an optional step. Doing Magos purple for the mouths. Retributor armor again to do all of the gold. So there's this band back here, depending on which model it is. The headband for the headdress. Then sections of the blowpipe I make gold. The loincloth. and then any bracelets that you see. Grab your contrast wildwood and your small detail brush, because we're going to do all of the ropes and banding on these guys. They have a band here for all of their darts. I'm going to go back with white and cover those up. And then some of them have a necklace that I also do. And then I choose to mascara the eyes just to make them pop a little bit more. But you don't have to do that. We're going to come back with yellow and dot the middle of these yellow. And usually I'll switch my brush and do all the pipes separately. But this is just to show you with the dark brown on the pipes. Yeah, I'm grabbing some white and going to be painting the darts that are on there, strapped in here in the corner. And then if you got any paint, for example here I got some on the feathers, go ahead and paint that white as well. Clear from sepia. Now here, unlike the warriors, I did not put the dark brown at the base. You can do that, but again, got to get these done, so skip that part on these guys. I'm going to grab some iron yellow to do the headdresses of these guys in yellow. Now you can do all kinds of different colors, so my Star Priest here has a two-tone yellow to green, but for these regular skinks I'm just gonna do one color. And you know, I thought about doing blue just to match this little flap here, or to tie in a little bit more with the warriors, but I'll just go ahead and do yellow. I actually thought about keeping these feathers white, but decided just to give it a little bit of color was better. But you can decide whatever you want and what works for your army's color scheme. I like ironed in yellow just because it is super fast. Once again, grab your yellow, whichever you prefer, as opaque as possible, and use your small brush just to dot the eyes. These eyes on these skinks are bigger than on the warriors, but that's it. Last step before varnishing is to do the black base. I want to show you that this is what I use to varnish all of my miniatures. This is the Rust-Oleum Dead Flat. This is the most matte spray that I can find. I used to use Tester's Dull Coat, but they changed their formula and it didn't work anymore. So this is the best one that I found. A little bit pricier, but this is well worth it. So if you have Rust-Oleum in your area, go ahead and grab this. I just do one coat on to my models and it keeps them really matte.